The state of the Labour Party and its leadership, just look at their behaviour. Now, there's a general election on, you may have missed it, which is completely unlosable for the Labour Party. The Conservatives are finished, they're toast, they're 21 points behind with 5 weeks to go until polling day. It's all over. Labour have this great unmissable opportunity to present a compelling, inspiring alternative vision to the country about what they're going to do. The answers they've got to our endless problems and challenges and injustices. And what are they doing with this general election campaign instead? Oh, I know, they're declaring war on their internal opponents. Great idea, particularly targeting women of colour and other minorities. Now, we know the saga, of course, about Diane Abbott. I've done a whole video about this, the nation's first ever black female MP, and how it turns out the so-called independent investigation into her finished 5 months ago, that she was now in the clear, and it was the Labour leadership preventing her from standing again as the local candidate for Hackney North and Stoke Newington. She had been overwhelmingly, in fact, unanimously reselected by her local party members, despite the repeated dishonest claims of the Labour leadership. Labour aides kept briefing against her to the Murdoch press, stating she'd never be allowed to stand as an MP, in a process the former Tony Blair aide, John McTernan, described as designed to humiliate her. And now they've started purging others. Enter Faiza Shaheen, who was the Labour candidate for Chingford and Woodford Green, standing against one of the most despised, I would say, Conservative politicians, Ian Duncan Smith. She's everything Labour should want. Daughter of a mechanic, a Muslim woman of colour who defied the odds and became a flourishing academic. And even though in 2019, the election, she defied the odds again, being one of the only, or running a campaign which had one of the only swings towards Labour in the entire country. Sure, she's on the left of the Labour Party, so she believes in things like public ownership, the rich paying their fair share, workers' rights, and, no carpet bombing of Gaza and slaughtering of its people. Last year, she was overwhelmingly reselected by local members who are unsurprisingly very committed to her. Let's have a little glimpse at her campaign video.
I'm Faiza Shaheen, the Labour candidate running to be your MP in Chingford and Woodford Green. Many years ago, my mum sat here in Ridgeway Park, pregnant with me. My mum had come to this country with big dreams for her family. She wanted us to do well in school so we could have a better life than her. But when she came here from Pakistan, she hadn't realised what a difficult time she would have, with an abusive husband and a struggle with her own health. But back then things were different. She could get help from a better funded NHS, a strong welfare system that meant her 3 kids were at least well fed, and at a time that her kids could go to university and come out without being tens of thousands of pounds in debt. Years later, I sit here with my son, and so many things have gotten worse.
So yesterday, she's out at a canvassing session, surrounded by her committed volunteers, holding a newborn baby, when all of a sudden her phone blows up. Why? Because she learns via the Times newspaper that Starmer aides have briefed their planned political destruction of the political careers of their opponents, that she has been deselected by diktat from on high. The evidence? That she's tweeted criticising Islamophobia and the Labour Party and wider society not being treated seriously enough. Well, this is one way for Labour to disprove that one. Just imagine for a second a Jewish candidate was suspended for liking a tweet criticising anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And as for liking completely harmless tweets, such as one which called for a boycott of Israeli goods on the grounds that it works in South Africa, what do you even say? She praised, these aren't even tweets she sent out herself, she just likes them. One praising Jeremy Corbyn, as Keir Starmer himself did to become leader of the Labour Party. One, I kid you not, describing a sketch by the American Jewish comedian Jon Stewart, which describes how you are mobbed online when you criticise Israel. Jon Stewart went on to tweet, "This is the dumbest thing the UK has done since electing Boris Johnson." He's speaking about Faiza Shaheen's purge. What the actual fuck? Yes, well, quite. Now, let's listen to Faiza. She went on the BBC's Newsnight programme to discuss what had happened. It was a heartbreaking interview.
And one of them was about my experiences of Islamophobia in the party. Like, how am I not allowed to talk about my experiences of Islamophobia and the double standards that I've seen and that we see with Diane Abbott, for instance? I honestly, I'm just so shocked right now to be treated this badly after being such an active member of the party. And, you know, we were one of the tiny number, 6 Tory-held seats in 2019 that had a swing to Labour. To act like I am some kind of person that can't, you know, that isn't good at elections, that, you know, that frustrates the Labour's purpose. I mean, you know, my teacher...
Is that what the...
Now, Keir Starmer was asked about this purge, and there's more to come, by the way, as I'll explain, and he said this.
Are you blocking left-wing candidates from standing in this election?
No. I've said repeatedly over the last 2 years as we've selected our candidates that I want the highest quality candidates. That's been the position for a very long time.
The highest quality candidates. Is that right? So he's saying Faiza Shaheen isn't one of the highest quality candidates. Is that the same Keir Starmer who previously described Faiza Shaheen as a fantastic candidate, as a fabulous candidate, as someone with passion, expert understanding and insight on inequality? I mean, this guy couldn't praise her enough. Maybe to be a candidate of the highest quality, Faiza Shaheen would have to be A, a white man, who B, racially abused a journalist, and C, had a sexual harassment complaint upheld against him. I'm here referring to Neil Coyle. He's the Labour candidate in Bermondsey. Now, Faiza Shaheen is taking legal advice and has rightly said that Labour has a problem with black and brown people. Now, take a step back here. She's not done anything wrong. Yet the nature of how she was taken down has meant the term anti-Semitism has been bandied around by media outlets. But she hasn't done anything anti-Semitic, even slightly. The leadership has deliberately introduced that in order to take someone down they don't want for factional purposes. As Rachel Shabby, the brilliant British Jewish journalist, writes, Labour using risible claims of anti-Semitism to bully and ruin the political fortunes of women of colour is one of the most obnoxious things I've seen in politics. It is using fake accusations of racism to be racist, utterly shameful. No self-declared anti-racist would tolerate it. Other MPs on the left face the chop, like Epsana Begum in Poplar and Limehouse, a victim of domestic abuse, and yes, you guessed it, another woman of colour. Now, here's another example, Lloyd Russell Moyle, one of the most prominent gay MPs in Britain, someone who stood up for progressive policies and against, say, the mass slaughter of Gaza. He is the MP for Brighton Kemp Town. Suddenly a complaint's lodged against him, dating from an accusation 8 years ago, which he says is entirely false and is conveniently timed, so he cannot stand as a candidate in the election because the investigation is pending. And who do I find out is set to be parachuted in to take his place? Chris Ward, formerly a long-standing close friend of mine. He stayed at my parents' flat in Edinburgh. We've got drunk together many a time, made lots of very repetitive Alan Partridge-based jokes. He was obsessed with becoming an MP in his hometown, Brighton, and had a particular grudge against Caroline Lucas and the Green Party. We argued a lot, not least because he was a passionate devotee of Tony Blair, a defender of the Iraq War, and a cheerleader for the Israeli state. Now, he spent years as a parliamentary bag carrier, his ambitions frustrated, until this little-known guy named Keir Starmer became an MP and made Chris Ward a staffer and then his chief of staff. Now, I've mentioned this on Twitter and some have gone, Owen, how outrageous. This was your friend. How could you betray him like this? Let me continue. During the leadership campaign Keir Starmer ran, the most dishonest campaign in British democratic history, Chris Ward just fed me that dishonesty. He claimed Starmer wanted to keep the Corbyn ally John McDonnell as Shadow Chancellor. I mean, frankly, John McDonnell would be lucky to stay on as a Labour candidate in this election. He would ring me up to reassure me that pledges such as hiking taxes on the top 5% of earners were cast iron commitments. He did this in pursuit of one particular aim, if we're going to talk about friendship, to destroy political cause the left he knows I dedicated my life to. We drifted after this, I think it's fair to say. He went on to work for Hanbury Strategy, a corporate lobbying firm set up by two Conservatives, one of them the former PR lead for Vote Leave. And now it's suddenly reported that he's to be given Lloyd Russell Moyle's seat, with no vote, just parachuted in. Let's just consider this. One of Starmer's closest aides spends his life desperately hanking after a parliamentary seat in Brighton. His career was flatlining, he knows this. He knew he had no chance of getting selected. Then, on the eve of the general election, a Brighton MP suddenly has his entire career terminated based on a very well-timed complaint, I might add. And Chris Ward can finally get the seat he always wanted. Now, a principled local MP voted for by his local members repeatedly, replaced by a political operator and a corporate lobbyist who not a single local activist has voted for. That stinks. And it's not a betrayal of friendship to pull back the curtain and tell you, the people, the voters, what happens behind the scenes whilst these machine politicians are suddenly imposed with no democratic say. And indeed, Starmer's allies have just been acting like colonial operators, dividing up safe seats, tossing them around like sweets to each other, parachuting people into constituency they don't even have anything to do with. Like Josh Simons, the director of Labour Together, a Starmerite think tank funded by wealthy individuals, whose former chief economist used to work for vulture capitalists BlackRock. You want to know who the future of the Labour Party belongs to? Listen to this clip.
My main concern with Rwanda is not actually the human rights implications of it and the focus of this report. My main concern is that it's a complete waste of money and it won't work. it won't stop the boats. You know, that was the thing that Rishi said, judge me by stop the boats. He's failed. Yes. He keeps failing. And meanwhile, he's spending £8 million a day and so far 400 million quid. So my problem with Rwanda is that it won't work. So the hard question is, what you're going to do instead? And I think that while the Conservatives say that they are being tough on the borders and beefing up the policing and so on, I have seen no real evidence that that is in fact what they are doing with the kind of commitment and clarity that they need to. I mean, you know, why don't you send the smuggler gangs and put them on the barge that, you know, has been set aside for the asylum seekers to, and then, you know, ship the barge up to the north of Scotland for all I, you know, who cares?
The state of it. Well, I'm glad we're getting rid of candidates like Faiza Shaheen in place of people like that. Excellent stuff. So his only public splash to date has been insulting Scotland, which the Scottish National Party, I would know, understandably have latched onto. You want another example? Don't say I don't, leave the best for last. Take Luke Akehurst, the director of We Believe in Israel. It does what it says on the tin. It's a pro-Israel lobbying group currently urging voters to lobby MPs to support Israel's genocidal onslaught in Gaza. This is a guy who still thinks the Iraq war was a good idea, who defends the Vietnam War and who has uncritically defended Israel's onslaught, who opposes a ceasefire and has called the United Nations anti-Semitic. You want a joke? How about this? When standing for leader, Keir Starmer said, the selections for Labour candidates needs to be more democratic and we should end NEC impositions of candidates. Local party members should select their candidates for every election. What do you even say, eh? What do you even say, guys? Like all of his promises, of course, a total sham. There's no question about what will happen now. Keir Starmer's advisors will keep carving up safe seats, treating those local voters with contempt. Your constituencies are now just means to advance the careers of these carpetbaggers, while they will keep purging local candidates selected democratically by local members who actually believe in something. I'll say this. Starmer's lot, they'll walk this election. They'll absolutely walk it because the Tories have destroyed themselves, not because there's any enthusiasm for them. And believe you me, they will fall apart in government. And wait till the British public have to see these people on a daily basis and listen to them. They don't have any principles, no vision, nothing. I don't think it's going to go down well. I'll give you that. Whatever I think about New Labour, those who founded it were substantial figures. This lot, dead behind the eyes, cynical political operators who believe in nothing than personal ambition, driven by factional spite. And do you know what? The voters, they'll smell that out. And this is how they run the Labour Party. What do you think they're going to be like in power, guys? Well, they're going to win anyway, by a landslide, and they're going to have a lot of power. If you vote Labour, you're just gifting them a vote they don't need, and you will make sure they won't listen to you. If you vote Green or Independent, then you will put pressure on them, or they will ignore you and keep marching off in the direction of the Conservatives and keep driving out anyone, frankly, to the left of Genghis Khan. Is that really what you want? If you don't, then I would suggest do something about it. Please like and subscribe. Do leave your comments. Do help us take on these awful people at patreon.com/OJOS84. Listen to the podcast. I'll speak to you soon.